Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. Today, I'm joined by Joe Sullivan. He's the co-founder over at Gorilla 76. Joe, welcome to the show. How's it going today?
It's all good, Logan. Good to be here.
Awesome, man. You and I were having some great conversations over the last few weeks, and we've both been thinking about this idea of how do we create content more efficiently for our customers. And I think there are going to be some things, whether you work for an agency or you're a brand marketer, that you'll be able to take from this conversation. We're going to be breaking down this idea of content creation in batches up front. But before we get into today's conversation, Joe, give us a little bit of background for folks who aren't familiar with you, like myself and the Sweetfish team are. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you and the Gorilla 76 team are up to these days.
Yeah, you got it. So, I'm a co-founder of Gorilla 76, where we position ourselves as an industrial marketing agency. So we help essentially mid-sized manufacturers identify the right types of customers, create focus on them, and then figure out how to attract them, engage them, and start real sales conversations with them. So yeah, we've been in business for, I guess, about 14 years as of this coming May. And I've sort of slowly grown from my business partner, John, and I, who founded the business in 2006 to a team of 18 as of today. A couple new employees just started this morning. So
awesome, man. When you have to start thinking about that employee count, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, no kidding.
14 years is no small feat. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, Joe, you and I were talking about this the other day. Offline, I was sharing some things. Some of the listeners of this show might know, traditionally at Sweetfish, we've created podcasts for other brands. We're making this shift now to where we're adding another service where we create podcasts for a specific functional role or a specific industry. And one of the big shifts we've been going through, as opposed to kind of our typical MO of podcast production of coordinating guest interviews, trying to keep kind of a backlog of, a month and a half worth of content to stay ahead of it. But it's been very much for us in the way we produce podcasts, just kind of stay a little bit ahead of it. And through several iterations of what we used to call media days, we now call 48 hours to industry influence. We are moving towards this model of a 2-day immersive session with our customers to create about 6 months worth of content. And along those same lines, you guys have been going through a similar shift to at least test out this idea of doing more of an intensive batch creation of content. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the thinking that's gone into that? And then we'll get into some of the maybe pros and cons of this as we break it down some.
Yeah, for sure. So for us, the type of work we do for our clients, it all kind of starts with strategy and figuring out, how are we going to get this company from point A to point B via marketing? And a big piece of this is going to be sort of leveraging the expertise and knowledge of the subject matter experts within these companies. We work with mid-sized manufacturers, so it's a lot of times it's our team talking to the engineers on our clients' team, who are maybe they in turn are interfacing regularly with engineers or technical people on their customers' end, and so they're the ones who are constantly in contact with the customer. They understand their problems and what those people are trying to achieve better than anybody. And so it's always been a part of our process to try to leverage that expertise of our client and how to train it into written or video or whatever kind of content that's going to speak to their audience. And so what we found is when we start with a new client, there's always this learning period that's necessary. We have to sort of really understand their customer and what those people care about and the triggers that lead them into the buying process and the problems they have and everything. And it's, there's this learning period that happens at the beginning of a client relationship. And it's just necessary for us to be able to do the right work and help our clients produce the right content. But it's also not exciting for the client, right? They've gone through this. They're hyped up about getting started with this new marketing campaign. And then they have to sit here and go through this learning process. And then bit by bit, we're going to start interviewing the right subject matter experts on their teams with our journalists, doing research and publishing content incrementally as we finish it. That's going to be used for inbound and outbound purposes. And I guess what we have found, by doing this for so many years is there's always this period where, the client's level of excitement, it peaks like around the time they hire us. And then all of a sudden it dips for a couple months because we're busy at work learning their business and interviewing their experts and starting to incrementally produce content. And the reality is that stuff just takes time if you're going to do it well. So what we kind of landed on recently is we said, well, what if we could condense this process, have a more intensive sort of positioning and content strategy workshop with the client, and then come back a couple weeks later and get all the right people who, we know what content needs to get produced. If we can get all the right people booked on the calendar for the, a specific time of day, bring in our journalists or our writers, bring a videographer with us, and just do this intensive knowledge extraction for a full day or maybe even more if needed, capture it all, through these interviews that are now on camera. And now we've got this sort of bank of video content, but also these interviews that can be transcribed, that can be, turned by our writers into written content. And now we've got we're starting on day one with all this stuff we can use in inbound and outbound and through paid media campaigns, et cetera. So that's really the idea.
I love it, man. I want to dig into that first topic you mentioned about, kind of just the way the emotions of that post-sale typically happen. Whether you work for an agency or a B2B tech company, it's at the moment of closed won when we're celebrating, on Slack or in the bullpen and ringing the sales gong remotely or in person, whatever the case is. But that is the moment where your customer has the most potential for buyer's remorse because they have just if they're the decision maker on a B2B purchase, whether that's content marketing service, a new podcast, or a new sales enablement software, whatever it is, they're saying, hey, I was the flag bearer for this decision. And so they're most susceptible then to, did I make the right decision? And so if just by the nature of it, like you said, you guys are doing content planning. In our case, sometimes it's the launch of a new podcast. So we've tried to figure out how do we help people get onto a new show where we don't have to go through kind of all this, well, what episode graphic how do we want that to look? And what do we want the intro to say? And we just jump right into the content creation with the planning that goes to it. Tell us a little bit about, kind of what you guys envision as far as the customer experience by jumping into more of the fun stuff really is part of this. We'll get into maybe some of the efficiency gains in a little bit, but I think the buyer's feeling about it is just as important as anything else, right?
Totally. And that's definitely one of the main drivers here. So we do an agency book club every 3 months here. And one of the books we read, it's an optional thing. Some people participate, some don't. But one of the books we read last year was called Never Lose a Customer Again by Joey Coleman. I think, Logan, you're familiar with that one. But
absolutely, man. It's so good.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that even came up in our conversation recently. But I know I was talking to a few people about it recently. But one of the biggest insights that sort of popped out in our discussion around this book was that everybody just resonated with our whole team because we see it is this buyer's remorse, if you want to call it that. But this, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, there's this big build to launching a new marketing campaign and starting with, in our case, in our client's case, is a new agency, and there are high hopes about what's going to happen, and then all that you get into the nitty gritty, and there's this period of time where the client says, oh, geez, I hope I made the right choice. And what's happening in the background? I haven't heard really much this week. And the reality is we're in the background working hard and learning and starting to produce things. But those things take some time to produce. And even when they get published, if you think about how search engine optimization tends to play out, for example, just using one example, it doesn't happen overnight. Like you're building authority for a website that might have a very low domain authority to begin, and to build credibility for it takes time. So not only do things tend to be a little slow moving early on, but the results tend to be a little slow moving too, unless you're sort of proactively doing some things that direct marketing or paid media that are going to drive some results in the shorter term. So we've kind of looked at the situation holistically and said, what are the things we can do to keep the client engaged, excited, feeling that they've made the right choice? And I think a big piece of that is we just got to move faster. And how can we create efficiencies, right? And get things published and start to do some of the things that are going to get to the results more quickly, because nobody has patience they can't sit back and wait forever. And some of it requires that, but maybe we can balance it, right, with some things in the short term. So
I love that, man. I am a big fan of Joey Coleman's book there. I've heard him
Yeah.
on multiple podcasts, and those just add. Sometimes, you hear an author on a podcast and you're like, it's not as good as the book. He is as good if you hear a podcast with him as much as the book. Definitely recommend anyone who hasn't checked out that book, check it out. Whether you're in marketing or customer success or sales, I guarantee you'll pick something up from that. So I appreciate you sharing that, Joe. Hey everybody, Logan with Sweetfish here. You probably already know that we think you should start a podcast if you haven't already. But what if you have and you're asking these kinds of questions? How much has our podcast impacted revenue this year? How's our sales team actually leveraging the podcast content? If you can't answer these questions, you're actually not alone. This is why Casted created the very first content marketing platform made specifically for B2B podcasting. Now you can more easily search and share your audio content while getting greater visibility into the impact of your podcast. The marketing teams at Drift, Terminus, and here at Sweetfish have started using Casted to get more value out of our podcasts, and you probably can too. You can check out the product in action at casted.us/growth. That's casted.us/growth. All right, let's get back to the show. You touched on efficiency there as it relates to kind of the buyer's feeling, but you guys have a sneaking suspicion that it's also going to make your team more efficient. And so I think kind of our first point there is probably best taken for other agency leaders to be thinking about in their creation of content. But in this next one, as we talk about just the efficiency of your own content engine, whether it's a specific campaign or just your thought leadership and brand awareness content that is always like, what are we doing on that this quarter sort of thing, can help set up a foundation that if things do go awry throughout the rest of the quarter or the rest of the half of the year, you have some things in the works. Tell us about, kind of whether you're on the agency side or the brand side, some of the things in your mind, efficiency gains that marketing teams could gain by this sort of batch creation.
Yeah. Okay, so let's pretend you're a custom manufacturer of some big ticket item. It's a complex product. There's multiple people on the buyer's end that tend to be involved, that, it's a 3 or 6 month buying process. And you've got, this specific market that you're targeting with it. And that this is this is something you're going to be pursuing on the sales front as an organization, and you need to put some marketing juice behind it to generate leads there and to get some activity, happening. And so, one of the efficiencies I think you can create is if you say, all right, we're targeting this type of buyer, this type of company. These are the individual buying process influencers at those types of companies. These are the things they care about, the problems they have and the questions they have. Now, who on your team, who inside of your organization is the true expert on that specifically? Because if you think that way, now all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, this person is our expert on this topic, or these couple of people. Let's focus all of our content creation efforts here on what's in their brains. And let's do some intensive knowledge extraction with those individual people and see how much great content we can produce by just getting that person on your team in a room and talking about, answering these questions they hear all the time, talking about the problems and different ways to approach it, and long-term cost of ownership of doing something this way versus this way. And so I think when I think of efficiencies, it's as opposed to thinking of your content strategy as, we're going to target these 10 keywords and we're going to create a piece of content around each of them. It's where are we trying to grow our business? Who's the buyer? What do they care about? And who on our team is the expert? And then let's produce as much really exceptional stuff from that person's brain as possible in a short period of time.
Yeah, I love the idea of matching up that research on, like you said, the keywords, but the questions being asked, what content out there is answering those questions today, and then going to the expert and merging those two. One of the things we've been doing for these, what we call 48 hours to industry influence session, is doing search analysis on those keywords that are kind of within that theme that our customers trying to develop their thought leadership around. And we might propose to them 20 different topics, but then they might call those down to 12, because again, it's about that matching process, right? It's about like, here's where we need to create content, whichever way you go about identifying that, and then merging that with the expertise of the person who really has something to say about it. And there's some that gets left on the cutting room floor in our own case, but still it's more efficient. And the other thing I'll say too is like, for this knowledge extraction, sometimes we have folks that are like, oh, our CEO would be great as the host of the podcast. And when we have done it kind of the typical way of like, all right, even if we're booking the guests for them and they need to be available, 4 times a month, we're just talking 4 times a month for 30 minutes, because they're spread out, they tend to get pushed. And then, okay, now we don't have as many episodes in the queue, all that sort of stuff. But we found that like, hey, we need your CEO for a half-day session. That's actually easier to get booked and keep on the calendars than those 4 30-minute sessions, even though it's more time. Have you guys seen that as you've started to set up some of these sessions with the subject matter experts at your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's trying to get busy people booked multiple times for things is just such a challenge. It really is. And then things get canceled. It's just one more thing that could get canceled and moved, and then it slows things down. And then the client wonders, or they wonder, why am I not getting to results as fast as we talked about? Well, it's because the things we need your team's attention. And so, sometimes when you can say, hey, we're going to be super efficient together, we're going to carve out a day, and we're going to get all this stuff done, it's really appealing, on the client's end as well. So, yeah.
I love it, man. So we've kind of bounced back and forth, I think, benefits if you're an agency, if you're on the brand side. We talked about avoiding buyer's remorse, especially for agencies, efficiency, which applies to both sides. The third piece here probably applies a little bit more to agencies, but it can also apply to your marketing team and your internal subject matter experts, because unless you're a MarTech company and you're selling to fellow marketers, your internal subject matter experts, whether that's someone on your executive team like your CEO, or it's people on your product team or engineering team, that relationship between them and marketing is just as important as an agency and a client. And that's this idea that you and I have talked about, Joe, that the relationship building that can happen through this kind of intensive upfront batch creation of content, there can be some good things as you build trust, as you build the working relationship, set off on a good foot, and you ask more of them up front, but you're not always asking. And you kind of, from there, you start just giving like, hey, we got this. Oh, this is ready. Oh, check this out, right? Is that kind of your thinking too in the relationship between marketing, whether that's agency or brand, and the subject matter experts, the contributors that you need to create this content?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if this is your internal marketing person talking to one of your engineers or an outside agency, regardless of the situation, I think it's a fantastic, just sort of open two-way dialogue to be establishing, and for the subject matter experts to be able to understand from the very beginning why their contribution matters, and why why what's in their brains is going to be critical to your marketing success. Because you can't make this stuff up. If you're trying to produce exceptional content, it kind of blows my mind how many people are out there trying to produce content without really interviewing the experts, because it's what's in the brains of the engineers, or maybe the salespeople or account managers, the people who interface with your customers and understand them so well, that is so important. And so for your marketing person, again, whether that's somebody in-house or outside consultant or agency or whatever, to just sort of have that open dialogue with your subject matter experts to help them, to put the spotlight on them and say, hey, you're the expert. I need what's in your head. It really is a great relationship builder. We have some companies we've been working with, clients that have for a number of years, and it's really cool to look at the writers on our team and the relationships they built with those people. And it's just like friends having a conversation at this point when they do interviews, because they've built that rapport together.
I love that, Joe. What you guys are doing is really kind of falling right in line with what we're experimenting with, what we've kind of built our processes around with our 48 hours to industry influence, doing 6 months worth of content in 2 immersive days. You guys are moving towards a similar model. You mentioned you have some clients set up right now. Jury is out a little bit on, is it going to yield these kind of 3 main benefits we talked about today? Maybe you and I will do a follow-up episode and we can talk about some more that we've done done. I've heard some good feedback from Lori Richardson at Women Sales Pros and Chris Carolyn, who's one of our co-hosts on the manufacturing show with Metal Analysis Group. But we'll see. This is a really interesting conversation. When you mentioned you guys were moving towards something very similar to us, I thought, hey, we got to kind of unpack this in our thinking because it could probably benefit some other folks. So I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and experience so far. Joe, if anybody listening to this would like to ask some follow-up questions of you or just stay connected, follow along with some of your great content, which I know you guys put out gobs of, what's the best way for them to reach out and stay connected?
Yeah, you're welcome to email me directly, joe@gorilla76.com, gorilla like the animal, and then 76.com. And I would also encourage you to go to our learning center, gorilla76.com/learn. We publish insights weekly. That's really just all there to try to help you figure out how to grow through marketing. So
I love it, man. Joe, thank you so much for a great conversation and a great episode on the show. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Logan.
I hate it when podcasts incessantly ask their listeners for reviews, but I get why they do it, because reviews are enormously helpful when you're trying to grow a podcast audience. So here's what we decided to do. If you leave a review for B2B Growth in Apple Podcasts and email me a screenshot of the review to james@sweetfishmedia.com, I'll send you a signed copy of my new book, Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. We get a review, you get a free book. We both win.